Hi, everyone. Welcome to the That's Allowed podcast. I'm your hostess, Dr. Adrienne McKeon, and today we have Utkarsh Saraswat. Please introduce yourself.
Right. So I'm a pharmacy student. I'm a poet. I mean, not really. I like to call myself that. But yeah, I'm just another person, to be honest. I'm just here.
Well, I know that you have a podcast.
Yeah.
What inspired you to start that?
Yeah. So over time, I felt like I have had a lot to say. And because I'm kind of the person that doesn't really talk to a lot of people, doesn't have a huge friend circle or something. So usually all my thoughts are very close to me and like it's all in my head. So I was like, I have been wanting to start something for a long while. And with the pandemic and the whole lockdown happening, I was like, I have some time right now to actually spend on a project. So let me actually start this and see how it turns out. And it just ended up happening from there on. I got a couple of friends involved. I was like, you know, I reached out to a couple of close friends. Do you want to do this? Let's have a conversation every other day and let's see how it goes. And it turned out pretty all right.
And you call it's a silly, silly world, which I love because, of course, it is a
Yeah.
very silly world.
I mean, given the situation in which I started, it definitely was a silly word.
I think it's always pretty absurd, but yes, there was an extra dose of silly in the year 2020.
Yeah. I mean, if you can believe that,
Yeah.
given the year, I don't think you can actually believe that it could be more sillier. And somehow it was.
Yeah. So, what do you think is the story the world isn't getting?
Right. So the story I think the world isn't getting is the fear of failure. I mean, it's been talked about. It's not something completely new. And it obviously deals, a part of it deals with mental health and all of that stuff. So yeah, it's not something new. It's been talked about, but I feel like it's just the conversation hasn't progressed as much as it probably should have.
How do you mean?
Well, for a change, like nobody actually talks about the fear of failure, like how deep it can be or like what it stems from. And I mean, it doesn't come overnight. Like the repercussions of it might appear out of nowhere, but it's a slow build. And like if people approach it in a bit different way, maybe the consequences wouldn't have been that severe.
Mhm.
So I think there needs to be a conversation about it's okay to fail. And I don't like I personally believe like some of these things, like it's okay to be failing might actually end up causing a mentality of mediocrity. But like that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is do your best, try to succeed. But if you fail, that's not the worst thing in the world. So when you are not afraid of failing and you know that okay, I might fail, but at least I would learn something from this. At that point, you have a good attitude for learning as well as succeeding eventually. But because there's this stigma of failure being a bad thing always, you kind of have that fear. Okay, if I don't do this perfectly, I might fail, and that's like the end of the world. And I feel like that's something that should be more talked about. Like it's not the end of the world; it's just a learning step.
Absolutely. So everyone should have a growth mindset. I completely agree. I think failure is a necessary prerequisite to innovation, for example. Like maybe you can succeed at something the first time out, but that probably means you're doing it the same way that it's already been done or that you've already done it. So to do something new, to create something unique, you really have to fail a few times, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, a part of the creative process is failing, I feel like.
Yeah.
So if you aren't failing, that's great. You have done something right. But if you have failed, just know that it was a part of the process.
I actually
Like,
would take it a step further. I think if you never fail, that you're not challenging yourself enough. I think if you never fail, you're not being creative enough. I actually believe that. I think if you succeed at absolutely everything you try, then you're not trying things outside of your familiarity zone very often.
yeah, I mean, that could be a thing, or either you are just really, really talented, in which
Sure.
case,
Well, when I meet that perfect person who never fails at anything and yet is trying new things, I will agree. But I haven't met that person yet. Everyone I know, when they try to be creative and innovative, they fail sometimes and then they try again. I think
yeah,
the only way to ultimately fail is to give up on something. If you keep trying,
yeah,
you will eventually find a way.
yeah. I mean, sometimes, see, failures have their own sizes and their own impact. Sometimes it could be bigger, sometimes it's not as big. Like, and I think failure has to be seen from the eyes of the person that failed. Like, you cannot judge a failure just by your own perspective.
Sure.
But
Everyone's
like,
definition of success and failure are different too.
yeah, exactly. Like, if I'm like it was saying, aim for the stars, you'll reach the moon or something, you land on the moon or something.
Mhm.
I'm saying for that person who aimed for the stars, it would be a failure to reach the moon. But to everybody else, that's success.
Right.
Success and failure have their own perspectives. It depends on which perspective you are seeing it from. So, likewise, if a person in kindergarten, a kid in kindergarten fails his exam, you're like, that's a small hurdle, should be fine. But to that kid, it's like all my friends have progressed and I'm still here.
Yeah.
So to him, that might be a much bigger failure. But just because you have passed through that phase of your life, you can have an outside perspective of it and you're like, yeah, that is not that harmful. But to him, it's like a lot has happened and I'm suddenly behind the people that I was with. So it's
Can you
just
tell
a thing.
Yeah. Can you share with us a time that you failed and it was a ultimately productive failure?
I mean, the whole of last year, I believe. I mean, actually, the whole of last couple of years. Because, see, for most of the people, when the pandemic started, when the lockdown happened, people kind of panicked after a couple of weeks because they were like, well, we do not have anything new to do, and there's so much time on our hands. For me, it was actually quite the opposite. Like, I really welcomed the lockdown. I really welcomed everything being stagnant for a while because everything had happened so quickly for the last couple of years that when it and it was constantly going downward. So when everything stopped, I had the chance to start afresh. I was afforded the time to just think about what went wrong, how do I make it right, and how to progress from there on. So basically, what happened was up to my school days, I was never really a good student in biology. Like that subject just didn't interest me as much. I was more of a math or like a physics person. And after 12, there's all India entrance examination for engineering and all of this stuff. So I gave that. I mean, I'm just an above average student. I'm not the excellent one. Of course, my rank was decent, but it wasn't good enough to get into the best of colleges in the country.
Hmm.
So my father was like, see, if you're going into any other college, like any other private college at this point, you would spend more on your education than you would ever earn because that industry is very much saturated. And so he was like, there's this other industry, pharmacy, and it's not as saturated. It's very like self-employment based. So there's much better scope for you in this one. And I didn't know any better because to me, like for the last couple of years, up to that point, it had always been like, okay, you have this all India exam coming up, prepare for it. Train, like, study as hard as you can for this. And I didn't know anything apart from that. I
Hmm.
didn't know what anything else was. I was studying for that one thing. So when that didn't go through, he was like, okay, there's this other option. I hadn't researched my other option. And I was like, you know what? Parents always have the best in mind for the child. So if he comes to this decision, like, and this is at this point, this is a very career defining path because I'm going, like, whatever I'm going to do my college degree in, that's probably the path I'm choosing to take my career on. It was like, yeah, if it's that big of a decision, and if he has made this an option, he probably thought this through. So I was like, fine, let's do pharmacy then. And on what rank I got in my All India examination, I got a good college, and it was like, fine, let's study pharmacy. However, I did not realize the fact that pharmacy was completely based off of two basic subjects, which was chemistry and biology. And I was terrible at those two subjects. And whereas my strength was maths and physics, and there was no maths and physics at all in this particular field.
Yeah.
So, and now usually the first year of the college is it's like an introduction to the college life, an introduction to higher studies. So it wasn't that much of a problem. In the first year, I breezed through. It was a decent score. Fine. Second year comes around, and now teachers start coming into the examination. Like teachers start coming into the lectures, and they're like, "Oh yes, you must have studied about this, and this in your 12th standard. Let me continue from there on." And I'm like, "No, but I didn't study biology since class 8." So these people that I'm studying around with had 4 more years of studying biology in them, which I didn't do at all because I was busy studying the other subjects.
Yeah.
So at that point, I felt like, not just felt, I saw myself going further and further behind the curve.
Yeah.
And by the time third year started, I was miserable because anything they taught, I knew that if I study, I can get there. But there just wasn't enough time for me to study the basics and then come back to this.
Yeah.
It was, and like I said, the fear of failure started kicking in because up until this point, I was always one of the better students. Like, as I said, I was at least above average. So to me, I hadn't really failed as much. Literally, like every examination that I gave, I was a good student at it. I scored a decent score. It wasn't the best, but it wasn't bad either. And now suddenly I find myself in a place where I'm not the good student anymore. In fact, I am one of the ones that teacher is concerned about will not pass the examination. And it was suddenly a very different feeling because I'm like, and I am very interested in everything other than syllabus as well. Like I am very interested in all other activities. I have a good GK and all of that stuff. So I'm like, I know for a fact that if I sit in a one-on-one conversation with any of my classmates right now, I could probably outdo them in almost every other aspect. Like
Hmm.
I'm better at debates, I'm better at just holding a conversation or anything other than pharmacy. But what we are studying is pharmacy, so that was much more important. And there I found myself at the back of the class,
Yeah.
behind the 50, 60 other students that were in the class. And that was a feeling quite alien to me. So that fear of failure started kicking in. Like, I'm not doing as good. Like, there's something inherently wrong with me. And since there was that kind of pressure building up from the fear of failure that I cannot fail at this.
Hmm.
And even then, even after like the hardest of attempts that I made, I still failed, which was natural because I didn't have the basic to start from.
Yeah.
And it all came to like a head point at the start of like 2020 when it was the start of my third year. And at that point, I was like, I am so ready to just give up. Like, this is not happening. I have backlog in quite a lot of examinations. I am, I don't even have the necessary grades. Like, at that point, I felt like even if I somehow end up getting the degree, my score is going to be so low, nobody's going to give me a job anyway because I'm a bad pharmacy student. So I was so low. And like I said, I am the first child of my parents. So they basically what I do is their first experience in parenting. So of course, I had never failed up to that point. So it's like for them, the failure would be new as well.
Yeah.
And like I feel like I'm a very understanding child, or at least so I would like to believe.
Uh-huh.
So at that point, I was like, you know, if I fail, it's not just myself, like it's not just a setback to me, but to them as well. And that just didn't help. Like that mindset didn't help because I already had the pressure of performing way more than I should be. And then I added the pressure of expectations and all that stuff. And it just took me to a point where I was like, I cannot face the parents with this kind of result. And I cannot tell them at this point when they have invested so much money into my education.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot just tell them like, okay, this is not happening. And that led into such a bad routine of habits. And like, I basically started skipping college because I was like, there's nothing going to happen from this.
Yeah.
And like, I had all sorts of disorders at that point. Like I wasn't eating right, I wasn't sleeping right, and it just became a chain of all disastrous events. Like I was waking up at 12 or like 1 o'clock, I was sleeping at 3 or 4, and all this time, like it's not even like I'm doing anything productive. I'm just sitting there, sometimes crying for hours because I failed at something, and then repeating the whole cycle all over again. So it's like I'm not even being productive. And I know I should be doing something, but it's like even if I do something, just there's just not enough output that I'm going to get from it that I'm expecting. So at that point, it led to a point where I think in the late 2019, like towards the end of the 2019, I basically contemplated like suicide and all of that stuff. Like I
Mm-hmm.
started becoming suicidal. I was like, I'm a disgrace. I got into that kind of a mindset, which looking back on it, like now I have that outside perspective of it because I'm up year ahead. I have made much progress. So now I'm like, you know, maybe that wasn't that bad of a situation, but to that 1 year younger me, that was a big situation.
Yeah.
And yeah, so things just kind of went into a downstairs loop from there on. My suicidal tendencies got more and more up until like January 2020, where I was literally staring down the 10th floor. I was like, I could jump from here and everything will be just, it wouldn't exist anymore. And at this point, my parents discovered about all of this.
Yeah.
And I remember, like, I think it was January, like late January or early February. So basically, I live away from my home. I live where my college is. So one day I was just preparing to go to college for some reason. Like it just happened that I wanted to go to college that day. I dressed up, I got out for college. At the same time, my father was coming to college and he probably knew about what I've been doing and he wanted to have a talk or something. And midway through my college, I saw him and I kind of panicked. Like, what am I supposed to do right now? And I don't know what went through my mind. I was like, you know, the train station. is very close to me right now. I could just run away. And so I tried. And probably wasn't the best of decisions looking back on it now. But yeah, the young old me went took a train to some random station and started on my journey. And midway, like I had switched off my phones and all of that stuff at that point. I switched it on midway point, and there's like 50, 60 odd missed calls from a parent, a sister. And yeah, that whole process happened. They talked me out of it. I came back home. We had a couple of discussions about it. But even at that point, I wasn't really convinced. They were like, you are not going to college anyways. So don't go to your apartment. Stay here for a while
Mm-hmm.
and see what you want to do. I stayed home for a while. I was like, now that I'm staying home right now, I'm even being much more less productive. Like I'm not doing anything. I'm just staying at home. So you know what? Let me just go back to college because at that point, like I said, I hadn't known about any other options before I went to college. I don't know of any other options right now. For me, one option that I know of is pharmacy.
Yeah.
So I'm like, let me try once again. I went back there. I tried as hard as I could, again, failing in my classes. And then Holi happened, which is a festival. It was March 11th last year on Holi. I
Can you
came back
just
home.
briefly, because I think a lot of American audiences don't know what Holi is, and I love it. So can you just describe it very briefly so people understand what the backdrop is here?
Yeah, so Holi is a festival of colors. We basically apply colors on each other's faces. It's a festival it has a lot of religious backstory to it. And I don't know how much of that is relevant right now. So I'm just going to go through it briefly. Basically, it's a festival. And like any other festival, it's just a reason for you to spend more time with your family or your friends and more
Yes.
time to be. It's just an excuse to be happy for no reason. And
Right.
that's all
And
that they
throw powdered color literally at and on each other.
I mean, throw powdered colors and some like just it's like throw powder colors, throw water, just do
Hmm.
whatever you want, then eat like a maniac.
Yeah.
It's the best cheat day of the year,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
Because at that point, everybody around you is doing the same, so you don't have to feel guilty about doing something out of your way.
Yeah.
So even if you don't celebrate it, it's still a nice day. So last year, Holi happened. I came back to my parents' place for Holi, celebrated Holi, and the day after that was, I think, Holi happened on Thursday. So it was like Friday, Saturday, and then Sunday would happen again. So what I used to do was, because my place is not that far off away, what I used to do was I used to come back on weekend. Like every Saturday, I would take a train, I'd come back, I'll stay Sunday here, and then Monday evening or like Tuesday, I'll just go back to my place. So my mom was like, today is Thursday, and you will only go away for like Friday and Saturday, and then you would have to take a train back. Just skip college for 2 days and then just go back whenever you want to. I was like, fine. I stayed back. That Sunday came the announcement that let's try this lockdown. Because at that point, COVID was already gaining traction.
Yeah.
On Sunday, the government did a 1 day trial of like complete lockdown. So I didn't go back.
So what was your mindset there? Like you hear that this has happened. Are you relieved? Are you panicked? What's your emotional state around this?
I mean, my emotional state was non-existent at this point because like it wasn't even I'm upset anymore. I was just numb.
Yeah.
I'm just it's like at that point I've hit autopilot. I'm doing anything that makes sense.
Sure.
I'm not really thinking like if this is going to help. I'm like, no, if this makes sense, let me just do it. So when I heard of the lockdown happening, I mean, let's be honest, nobody knew what lockdown was actually meant to be and what Corona was actually meant to be. Like, there was in like our studies, there was this actually a subject in which coronavirus was actually a small part, and it was, I kid you not, it was just this big of a paragraph. And it basically, in that entire paragraph, what was written is coronavirus is a very unharmful virus. It is usually transmitted to animals and it is not as potent. So I was like, okay, maybe this white squid will not be as big as people are making it out to be. Maybe this is going to stop in a couple of weeks. Anyways, lockdown happened for months. At the start of the lockdown, I was like, fine, this is good, this is good, this is good. I'm getting my space. Let's just not do anything for a while and not feel guilty about it because nobody else is doing anything either.
Right.
First couple of weeks went great. I did nothing and I was fine with it. And nobody was getting on my back about it. Next few weeks came the transition. Now I was like, the government had just announced that the lockdown will continue for, I think, 3 or 4 more months. I was like, great, perfect timing. 3 or 4 months, I'll just study the basic biology or like the basic chemistry that I have missed on.
Mm-hmm.
I downloaded all the books of like class 9, 10, 11, 12 of basic biology. I started making this habit of studying 100 pages a day. Like, I will not try to go into details of it. I will not try to study, like, I will not try to mug up anything. I'll not try to understand anything. I have always been like a reader. I would read a lot of books. I was like, let me treat this as a piece of literature.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just go through 100 pages a day and cover as much as I can for the first part of it. If I have more time, I'll just go back on everything again and just make the foundation that much more stronger. I developed that habit. I started reading 100, 200 pages a day of biology this time for a change. And couple of months later, I was through like most of my. I had actually like had a read through most of my bio, like basic bio, and then I went back again because I had 2 more months to go. Now I started going into details. If there was a doubt, I would mark it, I would write it down, do the good student stuff that I was trained to do in my earlier days of school. And obviously, that was always going to help, and it helped. I got a better understanding of biology as a whole, and now the lockdown was extended for another 4 months, and I was like, brilliant. Now let me go through the basics of pharmacy once again. I brought out my books for like the first, second, third year, and I was like, bio is done. Now let me study this. I went through pharmacy books of first, second, and third year, then went into the detail, marked down every question that I had. And there was this list of 850 questions of doubts that arose. And I was like, for a change, these questions seem really good. Like, I'm happy that at least I have questions about something.
Yeah.
That means I'm on the right way. I started finding answers for those questions. I start to understand it a lot more better. Fast forward to now, the lockdown still isn't over, and I've at least believe I'm at least a little bit better. I'm at least reaching the average pharmacy student. So I'm like, good. Now the college is supposed to open, I think in a month or something.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, let the college open. I am completely prepared this time.
Fantastic.
Now I'm not. And all this while, like throughout this whole process, this is my academic side of problems. There was the mental side of problems.
Mm-hmm.
My suicidal, whether it be my suicidal tendencies, whether it be my fear of failure. I from the other time that I had when I was not studying biology or pharmacy, I started reading books about like social anxiety. I started reading books
Yeah.
about psychology and all of that stuff. And like the more I studied it, the more I got to the conclusion like, yes, everybody faces this. Like I started getting into podcasts early last year. So I was hearing more podcasts talk about mental health and stuff. And I was like, okay, this is normal. Because in the Indian society, talking about mental health isn't as normal as maybe some of the other ones.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like it isn't normal anywhere, but at least in some cases, in some countries, it is better than others.
Sure.
So I've had this new exposure to talk about mental health,
Yeah.
and I got to understand myself a little bit better. And I cut a lot of part out from like the podcast that I record because what happens is me and my friend, I picked one of my closest friends for the podcast because I knew I could talk about absolutely anything because he knows most of it.
Hmm.
Now, when we started recording episodes, we sit down, we have a conversation, we record it as a whole. In those conversations, we started going like very deep and we started talking about our mental health and all of that stuff. And I cut out all of that from the actual episodes I put out because I wasn't as comfortable with it, like people knowing the backstory of all of that stuff. But during those conversations, I got to know myself better. Like I was like, yeah, this happened, and I had this fear of failure of being a bad pharmacy student because I haven't ever been a bad student.
Hmm.
The fear of failing came because I hadn't failed as much,
Yeah.
at least in my academics.
Yeah. I think fear of failure. Let's get back to that a little bit. It really helps build resilience when you can push
Yeah,
through that fear of failure and do it anyway. And I really want you to take a moment to, congratulate yourself, pat yourself on the back. The fact that you used this time not to just feel sorry for yourself and, flail in like, well, what do I want to do? And you actually didn't give up. You took this time to go back and learn this stuff and teach yourself this stuff. And, you
yeah,
know, so many other people would have just given up and been like, this is too hard. I can't do it. You said, no, I'm going to take this opportunity and I'm going to use this to my advantage. And not only that, you looked at it holistically. You didn't just study the things that you were failing at, you looked at the emotional component of it and recognized that if you didn't fix that portion of it, it wouldn't matter how much you know because that would
yeah,
still
exactly.
sabotage you.
Yeah. So my father is actually a safety officer in the plant that he works in. So he has always talked about root cause analysis. You have a problem, find out why it happened, find out
Yeah.
the actual root cause. I did that basically with me.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm failing at academics, but the problem is much bigger than this. So
Yeah.
let me focus on the smaller part. Like, I'm studying medicine, so this is a great analogy. When a patient, when you see a patient, there is going to be a cause of the illness and there's going to be the symptoms of the illness.
Hmm.
So what any medicine is supposed to do is first of all treat the immediate symptoms so that he has immediate comfort, and then on a longer run of doses, you treat the actual cause. So basically, that's what I did. I first of all fixed the symptoms of being not a good student,
Hmm.
and then I went into the actual problem, which was my own mental well-being.
Yeah.
And at that point, yes, like you said, pat yourself on the back. I have been doing that for the last whole month, basically. Like
Good.
one of the biggest reasons I was when you like put out that when you reached out for the interview and all of that stuff,
Hmm.
I was like, now is that like if you would have approached me a month earlier, even I wouldn't have been comfortable to talk about it enough, and I
Yeah.
would have definitely not raised back. But this time it was like, now I'm getting out of that phase.
Yeah.
And the bad parts of it. So now I'm like, yeah, I'm completely over it. Now I can talk about it. Like, and this has also been one of the biggest problems. Like, you know, being introverted and having mental issues is the worst thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you have so much to talk about. Like, I'm a very talkative person and I can talk to a lot of people about a lot of things for a long time. But these lot of people have to be my very close friends.
Uh-huh.
Like if you ask me to say just good morning to 20 people, I would be exhausted by the end of it. Because that's like whenever I'm interacting with strangers, it's like a social battery and
Yeah.
it has very low capacity.
Yeah.
So and the thing is, when you have this close bunch of friends, you talk about a lot of stuff, but when it's something too close to you, you become more aware of it. You are like, whether they will judge me or not,
Yeah.
whether, like, would they see me as a different person if I tell them this, and all of that stuff. And at the same time, like, I have sort of a best friend relationship with my mom uh, throughout, like, my entire childhood and even now. Like, we talk about the most random stuff, we talk about most of our problems and all of that stuff. And, like, at this time, when she found out about all of that, she was like, "Why didn't you tell me?" And I'm like, you know, it makes sense to talk to you, but at the same time, I'm afraid of telling it to you. So you weren't the person that I was going to talk to about it, and there wasn't anybody else either.
Yeah.
Like, you know, uh, now that I have the space, I would actually want to talk about this. So the biggest thing that any mental coach or anybody that talks about mental health, the first thing that we discuss is talk to people. And I want to say sometimes it's not easy to talk to people
Yeah.
because you do have a lot of things to talk about, but you don't have the right person, or at least you don't know that if you have the right person or not, so you don't tell
Mm.
anyone. I feel like that's one thing that this conversation is missing about finding at least one person that you can talk everything about. It doesn't have to be a close friend, it can be a very distant one. Like right now, I'm talking to you, I don't
Mm-hmm.
know you.
Mm-hmm.
So this is basically talking to a stranger about things that I had been through. And to me, it's like, yeah, at the end of the day, even if you judge me, I'm not mad about it because there's hardly going to be a time when I would interact with you on a daily basis.
Right. I that's actually a big reason I created this podcast, to be honest with you. I really wanted to create a space where people felt like they could share their story and open up to a stranger because I think that can actually be so much easier in some ways.
I mean, I feel like that's basically the core of therapy. Like that's
Yeah.
the basic concept of therapy
Yeah.
because you know this is a complete stranger and he's not, like, even if he judges you, it doesn't affect your daily life.
No.
So you tell him about anything and everything, and in result, you discover more about yourself. Like actually, when like preparing for this podcast, I was listening to one of your episodes about how to be a musing, and in that you discuss like if somebody is going through a creative block,
Mhm.
talk to them because they will eventually find out themselves through the conversation that they are facing a problem. And that's basically what a good therapist is. He doesn't tell you what you are supposed to do, he tells you nothing. He just entertains a conversation.
And what do
And
you think about that? How does that make you feel?
yeah, exactly. Like it's basically about asking the right question.
Yeah.
And I think one thing that I was very fortunate to have is like I'm a very over analyzing person. Like I'm a very self-critical person. I'm a very self-analyzing person. Like right now I'm having this talk with you. Whenever I'm free in during this day, I would sit down and I would think like I said this. I could have said this better.
Mm,
Like I am hyper aware up to that extent. Like how are my hands moving? Are they looking weird? If there's one strand of my hair sticking out, I'm very hyper aware. Like okay, this should not come out. This should be like this and all of that. So during this whole process, that also helped because I was hyper aware of the mistakes I was making, and I was hyper aware of the causes of my actual problem. Like sometimes you need the therapy sessions because you want to find out what mistakes you're making. You want someone to ask you the right questions to nudge you in the right direction. To me, it helped because first of all, I was an introvert. I wasn't going to talk to anyone. But because I was a self-analyzing person, I was asking myself the right questions to lead me in a right way. And yeah, like more often than not, it's not the best thing to be that self-critical and that self-analyzing because it also creates a lot of other issues. Like I'm a writer, and more often than not, when I'm writing, I'm very hyper. Once again, I'm very hyper aware of what I'm writing. In the moment, I might feel like, okay, this is good. But by the time I even finish that piece, I'm like, this is not good enough. I have read much better pieces, just not going to cut it. So yeah, it has its uh, negatives, but it also has its positives, like every other thing.
of course.
I think the key is into balance between the positives and the negatives. Make sure the negatives don't weigh you down as much as the positives lift you up.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to transition for a moment here. Well, in just a moment, I'm going to do a little exercise with you, which I always like to do with my guests. But
Okay.
before that, I really want to give you an opportunity to kind of give like the solid takeaways that you really want people to walk away with. There's one that I want to say first, which is
Okay.
this is actually something that Einstein said, and I don't remember the exact quote, so don't at me, everybody. You can look it up. But basically, what he said was if I had an hour to solve a problem, I would spend 50 minutes defining the problem. You really did a great job here in problem solving by just defining the root cause of the problem. And that is such an important tool for people to understand. So, what are some other takeaways you want people to walk away from this with?
Yeah, I think first of all, that one, which you just said, perfect summary, I believe, of this particular conversation because I mean, that's basically you do. Like a good student knows how to calculate, but you need to lead him to the point where he knows what to calculate.
Yeah.
So, of course, defining the problem is just as important as solving the basic problem. I think the other takeaway would be not to be like have conversations with yourself. And I'm not saying be a freak about it. I'm saying whenever you are free in your whole day, just sit down for 15 minutes, 10 minutes, and think about all the wrongs that have happened in the day. If you try something, it goes right, it's perfect. Do not change anything about it. But if you try something and it goes wrong, when you're free for those 10 minutes, sit down and think, okay, how I did this, like how I started doing this, where I might have gone wrong,
Mhm.
experiment with what you have done wrong, experiment what other things you could have done. Try those other things. Maybe you will fail 5 more times before you succeed that one time. But that one time that you succeed would be the one time that you would be super proud of yourself. And
Absolutely.
that builds that endurance, that builds resilience.
Mhm.
Next time, no matter what the problem is or how big the problem is, you can actually sit down again for 10 minutes, think about what you did, think about what you did wrong, think about what you could have done, and then do that. Again, you might fail, but you know from your experience that yes, I did fail 5 times before, but I did get it right in the end. And that's all there is to it. Get it right in the end. If you did it right, nobody is going to ask you what you did wrong. Like, this is a constant problem that I have with myself. Sometimes I say things like this and I'm like, maybe I'm being too philosophical for my age.
Embrace
Yeah,
it.
basically.
Embrace it.
Yeah,
You're philosophical.
yeah. So basically, yes. Don't be afraid of failing. It's just a learning step. I mean, sometimes something that I really like to do is I used to write short songs back in like 10th and 12th, and sometimes I open that book. Like, see, one thing that's very good about being organized is you always have your stuff in one place. So I
Yeah.
used to write in this particular uh, notebook, and I kept it safe. And now sometimes I just pick that up. I go through all my songs, cringing at everything I wrote because I know now that those were not good. But that is good to me. If I'm cringing on it, it means I have made progress.
Mm-hmm.
So if you sit down for 10 minutes and if you think what you did wasn't the best, or if you're cringing at your decision, that means you have already learned from them.
Yeah.
And now you can have a fresh approach to all those same problems whenever they arise next.
Absolutely. All right. So let's do this little exercise here. So I'm going to have you just close your eyes for a moment. We're going to take some deep breaths first because I just like to do that. And as I breathe in, I love to just picture colored light coming into my body. So I'm just going to see what color I get today.
Right?
So mine was kind of silvery and sparkly. What did you get?
Um, Purple, very neonish purple.
Nice. Let's do it again. Power of suggestion. Mine was purple this time.
Mine was yellow, like goldenish, but a dull golden.
Beautiful. I love it. Okay. So I'm going to wave my magic wand over here. And now everything that you deeply, deeply desire has come to pass. So you are now in your ideal existence. And I want you to, you can keep your eyes closed if that helps you to visualize, but keep them open if you prefer.
Yeah.
And just tell me what you see and hear and what you can kind of smell and taste and touch in this ideal, perfect existence that you're now in.
See,
Mm,
what I see is it's 5:30 in the morning. I have a day ahead of me, one cup of coffee, and a banger of a day. I have started this day very well, and this is going to be a good day. That's all there is to it. When tomorrow happens, we'll see what happens then.
So I want you to, you can smell that coffee. You can smell that.
Yeah.
What can you hear in this space?
I can actually hear that one insect that has been bugging me for the last 30 minutes in my balcony.
I love that in your ideal world, there's still an annoying insect.
I mean, see, no matter how the ideal world is, nothing can ever be perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm a bit of a daydreamer. Like, whenever I'm very free and I don't have anything to analyze, or when I'm not self-criticizing, I have this world that I have created,
Mm-hmm.
a complete different reality that I've created in my own head, where I am the hero of my story, and I get to do whatever I want to do. In that particular reality, the songs that I wrote in my school were good. In that reality, I learned to play all the instruments that I wanted to play. In that reality, I'm really talented. But even in that reality, there are flaws to it, because if you don't have a challenge to come over,
Hmm.
isn't that really boring?
So, what is the challenge that you have on this ideal day ahead of you?
Well, a few of them. I think the first one will be to think about all that I can do today,
Mm-hmm.
how to be more productive today, how to be in the perfect state of mind to get all of my things done, and then have a priority list of what comes first. Because that's one thing that will always help, and that's one other good habit that I have developed in this particular pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
Have a priority list. Like there's going to be 50 different things that you want to do.
Of
Have a
course.
priority list of what comes first, and that always helps. If and Earlier, like when my teachers used to say this, like have a priority list. My biggest problem was how do I decide what should be my priority? I have come across the best solution to this question. Think about what is one thing that if you do not do it, it will go horribly wrong. Then rate how horrible your outcomes can be. The more horrible it is, the more important it is to do that thing.
So true.
So yeah,
So I want you to think about something unexpectedly wonderful occurs. You weren't looking for it. You didn't do anything to earn it particularly. Just by pure grace, something unexpectedly wonderful happens. What is it?
oh, um, see, when you said that, I was actually thinking of something wonderful that will happen.
Mhm.
I've I just started thinking of something that wonderful happened, which was basically whole of last year.
Mm.
Like honestly, sometimes I still sit down and think about all of things that happened last year, and I'm very surprised and I'm very proud of myself. Like
Mm.
when I started the podcast, I had nothing particular in mind to discuss and all of that stuff. But then the conversations that came from that podcast, the people I got to sit with, and yeah, like I just feel, sometimes it feels weird. Like, okay, this might not be real because it's just too good to be true. I
Yeah.
get to sit around with amazing people, have amazing discussions over an hour of my day, and then just it's almost like zoning into that perfect space.
Yeah.
Like when I'm doing something that I really like, that's the perfect space for me.
Absolutely.
One more thing that I will talk about before we
Yeah.
go off.
Yeah.
I have never liked the concept of meditation that people have. Like usually whenever someone talks about meditation, the first thing that comes to mind is sit down, take deep breaths, and all of that stuff. See, sometimes it doesn't work for some people because, like for me, I have I have tried yoga and all of that stuff. It just doesn't work for me because my mind is too excited all of the time to be in that particular mood. And I believe meditation is something that completely takes you out of everything that's happening around you, that allows you to focus on one activity, that allows you to distance yourself from the world and just enjoy the one thing that you want to do.
Yeah. Just be in flow.
Yeah, so to me, meditation can be anything. Meditation
Yeah.
could be this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Meditation could be me just sitting in my balcony, looking out into abyss, thinking about whatever I'm thinking at that particular time. So for me, meditation is when I'm doing something that I really like. And I have always said like writing is my meditation
Mm-hmm.
because that's the one moment in my day when I'm writing that I do not care what's happening around me. I do not care what happened to me in the whole day. In this moment, I'm writing and I'm writing whatever I want to. In this piece that I'm writing, I could be whoever I want. I could do whatever I do. And this is my ideal world. So one thing that I have always hated is the because if people are going to make that a stereotype of meditation, for the people like me for whom the typical meditation doesn't work, they start hating the concept of meditation.
Right.
Which, when you think about it, meditation is actually a really good thing. So find your meditation.
Absolutely.
Find what you enjoy the most. That's your meditation. So meditation is not a bad concept. Just some people have, for some people, the typical way works, and they feel like that is the only way for meditation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think find your devotional practice, whatever that looks like to you, 100%. On that beautiful note, where can the people find you?
People can find me on Spotify at the Silly World Podcast. They can find me on Instagram at the Silly World Podcast. See, I say I'm a creative person, but I'm really not. I have basically, I'm basically stuck on this one particular thing. At the Silly World Podcast, search it anywhere you want. If it comes up, it's me. If it doesn't come up, I'm not on that platform.
Fantastic.
So yeah. Side note, do not try to find me on Facebook or on Twitter. I'm just not active. I hate
Mhm.
social media.
Got it. Thank you so much. This was a wonderful conversation. Thanks so much for being
Thank you.
here.
Perfect start to my day.